It's David Ingram. Bill Van der Zand just left, and what a character. Couldn't get his wife. Lillian was sitting right there. Couldn't get her on the air. So next time we do this, Richard, you're going to get a separate camera. We're going to have a spy cam on. We're going to get Lillian on air because she refuses to do it.
She's a beautiful lady.
Isn't she nice? Woman?
She is, yeah, very personable and charming.
Charming is putting it mildly.
Yeah.
My guest, Dan Walkow. Phones are open, 604-980-0321 if you're in Vancouver. And if you're out there someplace out in the boondocks or down in the States or Los Angeles or something, or up in Anchorage, Alaska, Kelly, you want to give us a call? 1-866-980-0499. 1-866-980-0499. It would be nice to get some calls. We haven't been getting enough calls.
No, well, we missed last week, busy with taxes, right? So we've taken a bit of a break.
I don't even remember why I just had to cancel it last week. Something just went crazy in my life. Oh, I had a bunch of stuff that had to go out. But we've got just a couple that aren't finished at this particular moment.
Yeah.
And that's not good.
Yeah.
We should have 50 people that have all called in the last 2 days and haven't had a rush this year because that's what's happening with the general economy.
Yeah, is that right? I was going to ask you about the tax season this year and how you found it. I knew it was slow.
Worst tax season I've had in 40 years.
Well, that says it all, doesn't it?
Worst tax season I've seen since I started in this business.
Says it all.
Yeah.
In terms of what's really happening out there.
Well, there's a reason for it, I think. And, a lot of what we do is a referral. People refer, the guy's sitting in Burnaby, or he's sitting in Sarasota, Florida, or he's sitting in Sacramento, California, and a Canadian walks into his office. He doesn't know what to do. He looks on the internet, finds us, gives us a call. We give him the answer, and he sends a tax return to us. That's happened twice this year. Last year it happened 50 times.
Yeah.
And what's happening is the accountants, the business is slow enough in general that accountants are holding on to their client this year instead of sending them out the door.
Oh.
And that's the same thing that happens in your business, and why I mention this, because the problem is too many people hold on to their client.
Well, that certainly is happening. I think two things in that respect. One, there's a push to retain any type of business you have.
Yeah, even if it's illegal.
That's true. And then number two is that in times of duress, like we've just gone through, there's a reluctance to change quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed, I was talking to one fellow the other day. He says, well, gosh, my account's down from 500,000 to 350 or whatever it was. He says, I just got to let it sort of settle out and come back a little bit, and then I'll think about things. He's clearly in need of cross-border services, but he was prepared to stay the course.
Well, I don't understand why so many people that need the cross-border service, should have the cross-border service, are silly not to have it, aren't doing it.
Well, I had an interesting call today from a prospective client who called me and had found us on the internet and called up, and wasn't a large IRA. She was living in Canada, had worked in the United States for a period of years, but had been back in Canada since 1996. Was still continued to do business with a broker-dealer in the United States. And when I asked her, I said, well, do they send you your statements, or how do they communicate with you? She says, oh, no, I still have my statements go to a residence in the United States. I said, this is over 11 years, or, it's almost a dozen years since, you've had statements coming directly. So, obviously, and she says, I guess I should change, right? I don't know what happens if I get caught, but I guess that's not right, right? And I says, yeah, you probably want to do something about that. So there's lots of it out there. There's no question about that. Whether there's a motivation to change, you'd think that with the publicity that UBS has gotten, for example, UBS is a large investment banker, a Swiss investment banker, which was doing business with U.S. citizens in the United States.
Without being registered.
And was not registered to provide service in the United States.
Can you imagine? And how big were they?
And they got fined, they're one of the largest banks in the world, right? And they got fined substantially on a variety of counts, one being not registered to provide service in the United States, among other things, and so forth. But certainly that's an event that every compliance manager amongst any kind of individual brokerage company would be.
Who would have thought
Yeah.
that they weren't registered?
Oh, well, exactly. And they certainly have the legal horsepower and people that know the rules and regulations. But I guess in the financial business of the shenanigans over the last year, a lot of the sort of shenanigans Bernie Madoff and other things are coming out into, as they say, when the tide goes out, we see who's swimming naked. Well, there's a lot of people who've been swimming naked.
That's an interesting. Well, I had a couple of days ago. I moved my office from Park Royal to this house in August 2004. That's 4.5 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And the fellow that drove the moving truck saw me the other day, and I was driving my old beat-up 1983 F-150 Ford that I paid $600 for, and he asked if he could borrow it because he had to do something. Now, this is the guy. I met him when he was driving the moving truck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, sure, as long as you've got a license. He said, oh, yeah, I've got a license. So I said, I'm sorry, but I want to see it. Okay? Now, whoever asks to see somebody's license in this day and age? If you wanted to borrow my car, I'd say, sure. Yeah. But I had a beautiful 1976 white Cadillac Eldorado convertible that I loaned to a lady who did have a license, that's true. She was in a head-on collision with a truck, and it turned out her license was an Alberta license, and she'd be living in BC for 6 months, working in BC. Her license was invalid. Mm-hmm. This fellow shows me his license, a current license. He renewed it a couple of months ago, but it's New Brunswick. Yeah. That's not valid in BC if you've been living in BC for the last 5 years.
That's right.
And I personally know he's been living here for at least 4.5 because he moved me.
Well, it's like anything else. It isn't a problem until it's a problem, isn't it?
That's right.
It's like cheating on your tax return. You can say whatever you want and file your tax return. It's never going to be a problem until it's a problem and somebody finds out. It's kind of like securities regulations, right? I mean, you've got investment advisors providing service in jurisdictions where shouldn't be doing it, and it's not going to be a problem until something goes wrong, or they get caught up in an investigation or something of that nature, and then it's going to be a big problem.
Somebody doesn't get paid. Yeah, so there's nothing.
Well, what we're finding now, David, just to interject here, is that with the markets being what they have, a lot of brokers are, of course, leaving the business or have left the business. So in a few of the accounts we've seen over the last few weeks is that the reason that they were motivated to move is that they'd been assigned a new broker. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, the new broker goes to they have to redocument them. When a new broker takes over an account, they have to do what's called the Know Your Client form.
KYC, yeah.
The KYC, so which means asking the question, well, do you still live at this address? Mm-hmm. Well, no. So this is sort of, oh my goodness, I guess I got to do something now, and we're seeing a bit of that. So these things sort of emerge under the circumstances, which maybe isn't such a bad thing.
Well, it's a tough one, and I keep on looking at it, and it doesn't matter every day because of what I do. Every day I run into somebody who's dealing with the wrong broker. Mm-hmm. People don't want to change. Yeah. They're either illegal or they're immoral or they're fattening, whatever, but they don't want to change.
There's a reluctance to change. I think a couple of things in changing. There's assumptions that are made that maybe aren't true, and it would be worthwhile clarifying them a little bit. How hard is it to change?
Yep.
Typically, to change your investment advisor, your new investment advisor, once you know them and they interview you and get the information, they prepare all the documentation and, in fact, execute the transfer. So there's not a lot of work required on the individual to expedite the transfer.